Before we read The Man in the Water, I'm going to ask you to write down a few terms and their definitions so that we can talk about the essay with this terminology. I'm going to ask you to pause after each slide to give you a chance to go back and write these in your notes. So I'm going to say pause and write, but then I'm going to continue on so that there's no dead air. So the first two terms that we need to understand are reflective essay and bias. Reflective essay is an essay in which the writer makes a connection between a personal observation and a universal idea, love, courage, freedom, etc. Basically, this is the type of writing that we're about to read. It's like reading a work of fiction or a work of poetry. This is a work of nonfiction, and the genre is a reflective essay. Basically, the author is going to observe an actual event, but they're going to make an observation about that event and try to connect it to a larger idea. They're going to try and show that that event is important. Bias is just a way of saying the writer's own opinion. When you write with bias, you are putting your own opinion in there. If you are unbiased, you are trying to keep your opinions out. A reflective essay will be biased because it's the writer's observations, hence personal observation, as we can see right here. So it's the writer's opinion about why this event is important. Pause. Okay. The next two terms have to do with bias. These are terms subjective and objective. You might see subject and object. Basically, subjective is any time, any type of writing or any type of feeling that has bias. Objective writing is any time you write without bias. Different types of writing try to have bias or try to be subjective, or they try to be objective. For example, your textbook most likely tries to be objective. A short story or a persuasive essay most likely tries to be subjective. These are stories or opinions of the authors that are getting in there, whereas the objective writer is just trying to give you some kind of information. Think of also a recipe book, a cookbook. Typically, the information in a cookbook is going to be objective. However, you might have a paragraph at the beginning in which the cook who is writing the cookbook explains why this is the best recipe. That would be subjective. So objective is when you just write facts. You're just trying to get information out. Subjective is when you're trying to put your opinion in. In a newspaper, we typically should be seeing objective writing without bias. However, as you know, if you've read a newspaper, if you read articles online, you will notice that a lot of news actually is very subjective. And the question is raised, can you actually be objective? What I mean by this is, consider an event. Consider there's a fight in the hallway. Pretend we're at school, I know. Pretend we're at school and there's a fight in the hallway. Two different people see the event from different points of view. Both come in to report exactly what happened in that fight, but they each give two different stories. Each student might think that they are being objective. They are explaining what they saw without bias, without their personal feelings. But if that were true, why would they be giving two separate stories? The reality is, each of them saw only what they could see, and they only saw from their own personal vantage point. Hence, when they told the story is coming from what they believe they saw. So the stories, although they are trying to be objective, end up being subjective. When we think of how news is reporting, we might always think, this is objective. This is without bias. The writer is not putting their opinions in this. But I want you to think about what information is included or not included based on the writer's experience and vantage point. You should recognize these terms from Study Island if you don't already know them. Main idea and supporting detail. The most important idea about a topic is the main idea. In nonfiction articles, we don't have themes. We don't have big universal messages that we have to figure out. If there's a big universal message, the author is going to tell us, and we're going to call that a main idea. The truth is, do you believe the main idea that the author is putting out there, or do you not believe the main idea? Usually that will be determined by the supporting details. If the author gives a lot of really good facts or other evidence that support the main idea that you believe, you'll most likely believe their main idea. If you don't believe their supporting details, you might disagree with their main idea. And our old friends, diction and syntax. You should already know what these are, but they're not going away. We're still going to analyze them when we read The Man in the Water. Diction is a writer's or speaker's choice of words, as we know, and the syntax is the arrangement of those words in the sentence and the sentences. All right. This is it for today. Make sure you have all these notes in. Go back to revisit this video to fill in the notes that you need.